Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save some money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could be hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
The last customer of the night at the Payless ShoeSource in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, Utah, bought a pair of size 10.5 black steel-toed work boots with green stitching and size 10 tennis shoes. Margaret Ann Martinez, the 50-year-old store clerk, rang the shoes up. She had been getting ready to close the store the day after Valentine's Day in 1994. No doubt she was eager to get off work. She was this close to vacation, to freedom. But something horrible happened next, something that would prevent her from ever leaving that store. Margaret's husband, Luis Martinez, grew worried around 9:30 that night when Margaret didn't show up after her shift. She didn't answer the store phone. According to the police report, at 10 o'clock, Luis called and the phone kept ringing. This was not normal because when the cash register is closed, the phone will only ring 3 times. Then a busy signal is heard. Luis thought that Margaret was probably working late to get the store in shape for the manager. But Luis, who worked as an air traffic automation specialist at the Salt Lake International Airport, was concerned enough that he went to check on her at the store. Right away, he saw signs of a break-in as he broke his way in. He saw the open safe. He saw his wife's purse. Again, from the police report. When he arrived, he noticed the glass broken halfway out of the front door. This was the bottom half. Luis broke the rest of the glass out of the door and went in. Luis went to the back room and turned on the light. He noticed Margaret's purse sitting on the bench. He noticed Margaret's coat hanging on the coat rack. Luis then left the back room and went to the front of the store. He noticed the carpet cover was removed from the safe. He lifted up the door to the safe and noticed the money was missing. But Luis didn't see his wife anywhere. First, he called 911. Then he called the store's manager, who had been on the job for less than a week. By the time he hung up the phone with the store manager, the police had arrived. According to the police report, the only things that Luis touched in the store was the light switch to the back room, the telephone, and the bottom of the safe. What was missing from the store? $849.73 in cash and 2 pairs of shoes, the last purchase from that night. There were signs of a struggle by the cash register, which was closed. Items around the store had been knocked on the ground. West Jordan Police Corporal Tom Hill went into the store's back room to investigate. Here's what he wrote in his report. As I moved to an open door, I observed a pair of legs just inside the door. Moving into the door opening, I saw a female, face down, on the floor with tape wrapped around her head and face. There was a pool of blood next to the head. The body was almost totally nude from the waist down, except for her shoes and socks. It was Margaret, and she had no pulse. She was dead. She had been stabbed in the neck and chest multiple times with scissors and suffocated to death by the duct tape wrapped from the top of her eyes down to her chin. Her hands and feet were bound. Her pants and underwear had been cut off. Her bra was unfastened, and her shirt had been pushed up. Near her head were the bloody scissors. Investigators also noticed a bunched-up tan telephone cord that was wrapped around her neck and her torso, and 2 small silver tacks by her legs. On the wall, written in blood, were 3 letters of the alphabet: T, S, G. There was a lot of physical evidence to analyze. On the ground were dusty shoe prints and shoe scuffs on the floor. There were plenty of fingerprints on the front door push bar, on the back room, on the cash register, and elsewhere the killer might have touched. Investigators put up crime scene tape around Margaret's car and around the back door of the store. They put on protective shoe coverings as they moved about. Luis Martinez sat down with police to give a more detailed account when he last saw his wife and what she had been doing that day. She had gone to work around 1 that afternoon. She then went home for a late, hour-long lunch at 4:30 p.m., then went back to the store. Nothing had seemed wrong. Luis phoned her at 7 p.m. to let her know that their boys had called. They were the parents of 2 college-aged sons. Luis told police that the following day, the 2 were planning on going on vacation to Wendover, Utah, near the Nevada border. Luis sounded like a broken man. "I don't care if you solve this or not," he told police. "You can't bring her back." Today's episode is a listener request. It's the story of a heartbreaking murder, an intense investigation, and an unsuspecting killer. This is Jillian in partnership with Law and Crime. You are listening to Court Junkie, episode 263. Investigators asked employees at the nearby stores what they had seen and heard that night. At the Radio Shack next door to the Payless, Nathan Plotz said he heard a woman scream and then banging against the wall around 9 p.m. He thought it was just Payless employees goofing around as they stocked the shelves, so he didn't do anything. He also heard the Payless back door open and close twice. Again, a little odd, but he had heard the back door being used before. He then heard 2 car doors slam. He never called the police, a decision that later ate at him as he laid in bed at night thinking, "I kind of feel like if I had done something, I could have prevented her from dying," he told the Deseret News. Other employees told investigators about customers who had seemed out of place now that they had to re-examine the people they encountered that night. The teenagers on skateboards hanging out front, the customer who seemed high, the driver speeding in the parking lot, the man who had a strange limp. The Attorney General's office offered law enforcement a tip too. A man had just been arrested for a telemarketing scam, and authorities knew he liked to pretend to be Charles Manson and Ted Bundy, apparently when he made the telemarketing calls. The man was a felon and had served time in prison. What's more, he had recently worked for Payless Shoes. The brand new store manager mentioned one employee had been fired 2 weeks prior for not opening the store on time. And at a nearby Payless, somebody else had been arrested for lewdness 7 months prior. When asked, Luis Martinez couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt his wife or who would want to retaliate against him by hurting her. Officer Randy M. Johnson wrote in his report, "I told Luis that even though he was not considered a suspect, we needed to look in both he and his wife's vehicles. He expressed great sorrow to think that he might be considered a suspect. I assured him that we were not saying that he was a suspect, but that we were looking at everyone. He readily gave consent to the search of both vehicles. The vehicles were subsequently searched, and I supervised the release of both of them to family members. Detectives interviewed one Payless employee whom Margaret had shown the ropes to and had trained. The employee said Margaret talked fondly about her husband and about how well they got along. The employee wanted a marriage like that. The employee also said something else that police found interesting. He said Margaret had a bad habit of breaking store policy. When it was closing time, even though a customer would still be lingering inside, she would often lock the front door so no one else could enter, but the last customer was then locked in with her. Then she would let them out when they were ready to go. A locked door meant that when Margaret was attacked, she was likely trapped inside with nowhere to escape. Margaret had also been trained that if anyone robbed the store, she should give the robber whatever he wanted. Investigators believed there was something peculiar about that final purchase she rang up on the night of her death. The last purchase had been a pair of those 10.5 size steel-toed lace-up black boots and a size 10 pair of white tennis shoes. According to the police report, the oddity of this transaction is that no change was given back on a $72.22 cash sale. Also, the cash register had not been closed out, which gives the total intake for the day. Another oddity is that where the shoes of the last sale came off the rack, the spaces were filled in with another pair of shoes and boots. Investigators soon figured out that whoever had bought the steel-toed boots and white tennis shoes, the last customer of the day, was likely the killer. The West Jordan police got assistance from Salt Lake City authorities, who, although they had been reportedly dealing with a gang problem, they hadn't dealt with a homicide quite like this one before. The bloody letters, TSG, that were left at the crime scene were a big clue. Investigators believed they may have stood for Tongan-style gangsters. According to a U.S. Department of Justice report, this gang reportedly consists of approximately 30 youths under the age of 15. Their territory is the West Valley Kearns area. Police questioned Luis and other members of his family to see if they had any ties to the Tongan gangs, but the Martinez family didn't have any obvious connections. Investigators had also found another valuable piece of evidence, a very obvious fingerprint that had been left on the duct tape on Margaret's pants. They compared it to dozens of sex offenders' fingerprints on file, but no matches turned up. And so there were no good suspects, as 40 detectives from departments across the Salt Lake Valley were investigating Margaret's death. Those who worked in retail were likely terrified as the killer went free. One Payless worker got in trouble for bringing a gun to a store. She wanted to protect herself. Another store owner nearby closed her business 3 months after the murder because she was tired of having nightmares and was afraid of going into work. The breakthrough came 363 days after Margaret died. Salt Lake County Deputy Sheriff Dave Dow, who moonlighted as a part-time firefighter, contacted the West Jordan Police Department with a major tip. There had been an arrest in another case where an attempted rapist, a man named Michael DeCorso, had kidnapped a hitchhiker, and when she escaped, he ran her over with his van. This occurred on February 10th, 1995. Deputy Dow believed Michael DeCorso could be responsible for Margaret's murder as well. The TSG on the wall may have been just a ruse. Michael wasn't some teenager from a Pacific Islander gang. He was a 20-something firefighter paramedic. By all accounts, Michael was a good paramedic too. In his line of work, he served the community and saved lives. He also taught at the local community college. Salt Lake City Police Sergeant Don Bell told the Salt Lake Tribune, quote, "When all of this comes out, the scariest thing about it will be how unknown he was." The day after West Jordan police first learned the name Michael DeCorso, the department requested the state crime lab compare Michael's fingerprints with the print found at the Payless crime scene. It was a match. Investigators then verified the print with another expert to be absolutely sure and confirmed a second time that the fingerprint did belong to Michael. As for the letters TSG that were written in blood in the Payless back room, whoever wrote that had likely worn rubber surgical gloves. On March 1st, 1995, investigators executed a search warrant for Michael's rental storage unit. He hadn't paid the bills on it, and it was in the process of being foreclosed on. Inside were items that seemed to suggest that Michael had the knowledge and tools to commit Margaret's murder. There were rubber surgical gloves, those black army-type boots, and books on self-defense, weapons, medical training, and wilderness survival, as well as combat knives. According to the police report, the uniqueness of the medical training manuals and the fact that Michael DeCorso was educated in emergency medical treatment, as well as taught emergency training at the community college, is that Margaret Martinez's pants were cut off of her in a similar fashion as a EMT paramedic training and procedure. Also, with all of the manuals on self-defense and wilderness survival, it shows that he has some knowledge of how to control a person in a situation that Margaret Martinez was placed in. Also, with Michael's training, he would have the knowledge that the use of rubber surgical gloves won't leave fingerprints. The police report also said there were also numerous knives, combat, butterfly, etc. found. It appeared that Michael had a liking for knives and probably knew how to use them based upon his wide variety of survival propaganda. This is also unique because Margaret Martinez was stabbed numerous times around the neck and torso, leaving very little blood spatter or mess around the attack area. Investigators obtained a court-approved search warrant for blood samples, hair samples, and handwriting samples from Michael. And on March 6, 1995, Michael DeCorso was charged with aggravated murder. Bail was set at $150,000. Additional search warrants were signed, including one for Michael's parents' house. Michael's mother was shocked that her son was a suspect. As a little boy, he had been involved with karate and was fascinated by surviving in the wilderness. As an adult, he worked 24-hour shift jobs at Gold Cross Ambulance and at the fire department. "I don't know the Mike DeCorso that is being accused of these horrible crimes," she told investigators. His mother was upset, but cooperated with police as they went through her house. Investigators also conducted interviews with others who knew Michael and who had worked with him. They were learning more about him, and what they found was disturbing. According to the police report, Mike liked to blindfold and bind his sex partners. Mike had a big interest in guns. He supposedly had accumulated up to 70 guns. He also pawned approximately 27 of these guns. He carried a gun in a black fanny pack he usually wore. Mike would bind people with duct tape, flex cuffs, medical tape, and ropes just for kicks. This has been seen by and performed upon coworkers and associates, the police report said. While teaching EMT courses, Michael showed his students how to make handcuffs out of rope. One person, who wasn't identified, described being handcuffed to the bed by Michael and then being left alone while he then went into another room to watch TV. Mike was obsessed with women and sex, the police report said. And he was also a fan of Payless shoes. That's where he went to try and pick up women. Again, from the police report. Mike would romance women by sending flowers and making contact with them at their work. 2 of these women worked for Payless Shoes. One store clerk says he would come into the store when she was working and talk about how he would like to have sex with her. Twice divorced, Michael at one point had an affair with a woman whose name was redacted in the police report and had fathered a child with her. According to reports, he once bragged about slashing his ex-wife's tires. He also complained to others that he didn't like his mom and he didn't like Hispanics because his ex-wife had dated one. He owed child support and wasn't paying it. His finances were also a mess. He reportedly spent more than he made, always buying drinks and dinner for people, even though he couldn't afford it. His checks bounced. His wages were being garnished for the unpaid child support. He had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 1992, and then Chapter 13 bankruptcy in December 1994, 10 months after Margaret's death. Other interesting tidbits police learned about Michael. He hated gang members. He was also very aware of the rising concern of the Pacific Islander gangs in Salt Lake City. He had attended a class with the Salt Lake City Police Department's gang unit. And while Michael's ambulance unit was on a call, somebody, it was unknown who, had spray painted TCG on the ambulance. Then TSG showed up on the same ambulance that was written in magic marker, according to a police report. Michael had been working both times the ambulance had been vandalized. Michael was regarded as a smart, talented paramedic. But the reason why he went into that line of work in the first place wasn't noble. Again, from the police report, Mike told one person that the reason he likes being an EMT is when female patients pass out in the ambulance, he can fondle them. On February 15th, 1994, the night of Margaret's murder, Michael had worked the day shift, which ended around 7 p.m. Then he left. That gave him a window to be the killer. Around late February or early March, one coworker at Gold Cross Ambulance remembered seeing Michael count cash that was stuffed into a gym bag. It looked like it was several hundred up to $1,000 in there. The coworker also saw a gun, handcuffs, and a canister of pepper spray. Others noticed him wearing the black honcho-style work boots and the white tennis shoes that matched the description of the last shoes Margaret had sold from Payless. Duct tape had also been reported missing from Engine 21. The store owner of C&S Discount near Payless reported seeing Michael DeCorso come in about a week after the murder. He had pretended to be an investigator and asked if the victim at Payless had been raped and how she had been killed. The store owner, of course, had no idea. Then Michael left. The owner recognized his face when she saw his picture on television. The strange interaction with him had left such an impression, she said it felt like it had just happened yesterday, and she contacted the authorities to report it. Investigators believed Michael DeCorso was a serial rapist and began investigating him in connection with multiple attacks on women in Utah, including the one where the woman had escaped. Estefana Velarde, a 52-year-old woman, said she was hitchhiking after getting into a fight with her husband at a family member's house. She needed to get away. On that 1995 evening, it was Michael DeCorso who picked her up in his van and offered her a ride. He opened the door and she got in. They made small talk until he pretended to be lost and pulled over in an empty research park. Then, according to the Deseret News, Estefana said she had a real sense of dread. A bad feeling came over her. Michael handcuffed her to the drink holder in the van and demanded she take off her shirt. I told him I was a grandmother and a mother. He said, "Let me tell you something. I don't care how many children and grandchildren you have," she later testified in court. He groped her, but Estefana lied to him and said that she had AIDS. That lie, according to the Deseret News, probably saved her life. Michael stopped attacking her momentarily, but then he tried to take her into the back of his van. Estefana escaped through the passenger door. Michael then chased her, and she was wrestled to the ground. She somehow managed to crawl underneath the van to get away, and then Michael got back inside the van and drove off, dragging her about 10 to 15 feet. When she got up and started running, he rammed her twice with the van before he finally drove off for good. Estefana survived the ordeal to tell her harrowing tale in court. She had described the van and her attacker to the police, who then arrested Michael 2 days later. Michael was charged with attempted murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and sexual assault on Estefana. Michael also faced more felony charges for kidnapping and raping 2 14-year-old girls back in 1994. The girls said they were abducted by a man who pointed a gun at him when he stopped to pick them up while they were hitchhiking. He told them he had killed a lady before and wouldn't mind killing one again, they said, according to the Deseret News. They identified Michael as the rapist in a police lineup, and DNA evidence confirmed it. In Draper, another suburb of Salt Lake City, an eerily similar robbery at another Payless ShoeSource had taken place on September 17, 1994, 7 months after Margaret's death. That night, the gunman, later identified as Michael DeCorso, walked into the store and hid in the back room until closing time when the doors were locked. He tried to rob the store, but this time there were 2 clerks. Payless had changed its policy by then so that no one worked alone at night after Margaret had been murdered. When Michael grabbed one clerk and put his hand over her mouth, the 19-year-old was able to fight back and screamed, alerting the second clerk, who ran out the front door to get help. Michael then ran out from an emergency exit. This time, he had made several mistakes. He left behind the cash. He left behind fingerprints. And one of the clerks later positively ID'd him as the attempted robber. Also in his haste, Michael had left behind a black fanny pack that had his crime kit inside, which included a flashlight, a pair of rubber gloves, a Swiss Army knife, 2 fully loaded clips for an automatic handgun, a small rope, and a Special Forces medallion, which authorities said looked like the same one Michael was known to have. In the store's back room, he had also left a bag that had 3 boxes of shoes. His fingerprints were found on the knife and on one of the shoe boxes. The Draper Payless attempted robbery was important because the judge presiding over the state's case for Margaret's murder was going to allow it to be brought up as evidence. Jurors were going to hear that Michael had a pattern of targeting Payless stores. According to the Deseret News, after all of these rapes, robberies, kidnappings, and even murder, authorities began calling Michael the Ted Bundy of the 90s. While behind bars, Michael responded to the allegations against him. "I'm tired of the hype and the vendetta against me," he told the Deseret News in an interview. "I'm not the serial rapist and murderer they claim I am. I'm not prone to emotional outbursts. I have never been. I'm no Jekyll and Hyde." The headline of the story read, "DeCorso says he's the victim." In covering the Michael DeCorso case, it kind of feels like a long ago era. Payless shoe stores aren't around as much, considering they were everywhere in the 1990s and 2000s. Many of the stores closed in 2019. And when an autopsy was done on Margaret's body, authorities shot rolls of film and had them developed. Some of the 175-page West Jordan police report is handwritten, and the original court transcripts from back then, those records no longer exist. Since we couldn't gain access to them, we read the Utah State Appeal court records and old newspaper clips to follow what happened at Michael's murder trial, which occurred in 1996. In opening statements, Michael's defense attorney, Brad Rich, said it wasn't Michael, who was now 27 years old, who had killed Margaret. This case is not about the tragedy of Mrs. Martinez's death, he said. It's about whether the state can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did it. We contend he did not. The defense's theory was that at least 2 other people killed Margaret, but they didn't give any names or any more details. That theory, though, did fit with the Radio Shack employee Nathan Plotz's testimony. He said he remembered hearing 2 doors slam that night. Nathan testified he heard a scream at about 9:30 p.m. and then muffled conversations between 2 people. Then the Payless back door opening and shutting twice, followed by the slamming of 2 car doors. Nathan was a witness for the prosecution, but the defense used him to boost their theory. The defense attorney asked him if he thought it sounded like 2 people getting into the car. Yes, in my opinion, he responded. But under state questioning, Nathan also agreed that the 2 slamming car doors might have belonged to a vehicle that wasn't the getaway car. And Nathan, who hadn't called the police that night, also hadn't looked outside to check and actually see if 2 people got into the car. Perhaps the smoking gun evidence in the trial, however, was that fingerprint found on the duct tape that bound Margaret's ankles. Investigators had matched that fingerprint with Michael's prints, taken when he was booked for attacking Estefana. According to the Deseret News, the fingerprint was a match on 16 separate points. Positive identification is usually made with just 8 matching points. A 16-point match was twice as good as the minimum accepted by the FBI. The fingerprint was essentially a calling card for Michael, according to Scott Spute, a fingerprint expert who worked with the state crime lab. There is no question that is the left middle finger of Mr. DeCorso, he testified. The prosecution also had a jailhouse informant who said Michael had confessed that he did it. Ken Doherty was in the Salt Lake County Jail during the same time as Michael. Ken was behind bars on an armed robbery charge, but when he gave the tip about Michael to the prosecution, the state dismissed the firearms enhancement part, so he could then plead guilty to a less serious charge. According to court records, Ken testified that Michael admitted to him that he had robbed a shoe store and killed the female clerk. He said that Michael told him that the clerk became unmanageable, so he hit her and taped her up. Michael had also related that when the clerk kept trying to scream, he hit her in the mouth with the butt of a gun, breaking her teeth. Police records showed Margaret's dentures had been broken during the attack. The medical examiner testified that what killed Margaret wasn't the stab wounds or the other injuries, but the airtight duct tape that was wrapped around her face. Ken testified that Michael told him the clerk became unmanageable, so he struck her a few times. She fell to the floor and he proceeded to beat the snot out of her. He stated it was more of a torture type thing. He said he lost control. He couldn't control himself. Michael gave further details to Ken, saying that he had intercourse with her and did not go to work for 3 days thereafter. The defense tried to cast doubt on Ken's motives for testifying, since he was getting a reduced charge and was sentenced to concurrent sentences instead of consecutive sentences for a pair of grocery store robberies he had committed. Other people taking the stand included Michael's former co-workers. Gold Cross ambulance driver Michael Bruce testified that he saw Michael wearing black steel-toed work boots that matched the description of the ones from Payless. He said he saw Michael wearing the boots the day after the murder. We were all sitting around during a shift change and he had on the new boots. We were teasing him about them, he testified. I remember them because of the green stitching. Michael Bruce also testified that he saw Michael pulling out $800 in small bills out of his gym bag and counting them near the back door of their work. I heard an amount when he was almost done. He said it was $800, but there was still some left. The bills weren't organized at all. It was like they had just been thrown in there, he told the jury. And jurors also learned about Michael's criminal history. You heard earlier about Michael's attempted robbery at another Payless store in Draper, Utah. One of the surviving clerks, Sunday, testified that Michael had grabbed her coworker Natalie in the back room, and then Natalie gave a high-pitched, bloody scream. Sunday told the jury, "I just got a feeling that I should turn around and unlock the door, so I did." That's when Sunday heard a man yell, "Stop, or I'll shoot." She turned around, and there was a man holding a gun. I froze for a minute and then just ran out. I heard footsteps behind me, but they turned away before I got out of the parking lot, she said. She ran across the street and called the police from Subway. When they arrived at Payless, Natalie, the other Payless clerk, had locked herself inside the store's bathroom. Natalie was scared, but safe. Sunday had picked Michael out of a police lineup, but under the defense's cross-examination, she admitted she wasn't 100% sure that he was the gunman. "I still do have some doubts because there are people who can look like other people, but I'm almost positive," she testified. According to the Deseret News, the jury's instructions were to compare the similarities between the incidents at the West Jordan and the Draper Payless stores as they considered Michael's method, intent, motive, or identity. As Michael's murder trial was ending in the fall of 1996, Assistant Salt Lake District Attorney Kent Morgan told jurors that Michael's job as an EMT meant that he knew where people hurt and how to relieve that pain. Wouldn't he also know how to inflict injuries? For his part, Michael's attorney downplayed the physical evidence that tied him to the crime scene, like that fingerprint that experts called Michael's calling card. "Do we know when the print was put on the tape?" Michael's attorney asked. "How did it get there?" "I don't know. That requires speculation." Michael's life was at stake. He could face the death penalty if convicted. After 23 hours of deliberations, Michael looked emotionless, according to reports, when the guilty verdict was read out loud in court. Margaret's husband, Luis Martinez, covered his face with his hands. His family cried and hugged prosecutors. At the sentencing hearing, the prosecution, along with Margaret's family, wanted Michael put to death for his crimes. "As a family, we're not vengeful," Margaret's oldest son said in the courtroom. "But we, as a family, would like for Mr. DeCorso to pay for this crime with his life." Michael's attorney argued that he was a human being and deserved to live. "There is simply too much killing in this world already," he said. According to the Deseret News, some of Michael's firefighter colleagues and his family argued that his life deserved to be spared. "There is good and bad in everyone, and there is plenty of good in Michael," his stepfather said. One of his colleagues said that Michael had saved so many lives on the job. "So many I can't count. He has a lot of compassion. He would do anything for anybody." A former boss at Gold Cross Ambulance called Michael one of the best EMTs I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He was always professional, and his skills were impeccable. Michael, who hadn't testified during the guilty portion of his trial, argued that the death penalty would be an easier punishment. Here's what he said, according to the Deseret News. "I just want to be forthright with you in explaining that, since the day of my arrest, everything that I've worked for has been removed from me by my own actions, and that has caused me an incredible amount of pain. So in really coming back with the death penalty verdict, You'd be doing me more of a favor than you think." Michael then apologized to Margaret's husband, Luis. "I would like to say that I'm very sorry, sir, for your loss," he said. "I wish there was something I could do to bring your wife back." In the end, the jury decided against the death penalty. Michael was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. "Thank you," he said, just before he left the courtroom in shackles and leg irons. It had reportedly been a tough decision for the jury, which had been deadlocked. Half the jurors wanted Michael to die. At least life with no possibility of parole was a sort of compromise. In Utah, the punishment for life in prison without an option for parole was relatively new, since the state law had changed in 1992 to allow that sentence to be put on the table. Anti-death penalty advocates had worked with legislators to make that happen. After sentencing, however, Michael tried to fight back. He appealed his murder conviction, arguing that his trial had been unfair for multiple reasons. He said the jury was biased because they had been allowed to hear evidence about the second Payless robbery at the Draper, Utah store. Here's what the Supreme Court of Utah said in its 1999 decision. Identity was the crux of this case. There were numerous similarities between the crimes committed at the West Jordan Payless and those committed at the Draper Payless, suggesting that the same person committed both crimes. For instance, the perpetrator of both crimes waited until after the stores had closed and the doors were locked to commit these crimes. He apparently entered both stores posing as a customer and then remained there until after closing. The victims of both crimes were female Payless store clerks. The perpetrator of the West Jordan murder took 2 pairs of shoes, while the perpetrator of the Draper Payless burglary had set a bag containing 3 pairs of shoes down on the floor in a back room of the store. Fingerprints matching those of DeCorso were found at both stores following these crimes. At both stores, the perpetrator removed or cut the telephone cord. The perpetrator of both crimes apparently used or planned to use some type of rubber gloves. The court also downplayed the effect that the Draper store robbery had on the jury. An attempted burglary where no one was hurt and no money was actually taken was certainly less sensational than a murder. The Draper store evidence likely hadn't carried that much weight with the jury. So in the end, the state's highest court ruled against Michael. The murder conviction stood. And so today, Michael Scott DeCorso is 54 years old and is housed in the Central Utah Correctional Facility in Gunnison, Utah. He has spent more than half of his life behind bars. And that's all for this episode. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Let me know by joining the conversation on Instagram at CourtJunkie, by tweeting us at CourtJunkiePod, or by emailing us at podcast@courtjunkie.com. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Russon. If you'd like to hear these episodes without the ads or hear additional Court Junkie bonus episodes, check out our Patreon options at courtjunkie.com/support. And lastly, I want to thank so many of you for reaching out with your emails, your messages, and your comments in support of me taking a step back and going bi-weekly, which is an announcement I made at the beginning of the last episode. For those who missed it, Court Junkie will now be releasing episodes every other week instead of every week. This was a decision I made with my family in order to be home more with my small kids, and I have to say I already know I made the right decision. Thank you so much for all of your support. You have no idea how much I truly appreciate all of you and the fact that I even get to do this. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.